Embiid got a piece of it. Running the floor. Embiid stuffs it.
Harden for three. James Harden with his second triple.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Pick Swap Podcast. This will be our series preview of the Sixers Raptors starting on Saturday evening. It's me and Sean Bernard. Sean, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware that the Timberwolves had already won the NBA championship, so I don't know what we're really talking about here for the playoffs because I guess it's over. But other than that, I'm excited for playoffs to actually begin. The playing games have been pretty cool. They've been fun to watch so far, so that's been cool. I'm ready for the Sixers to get back at it.
Yeah, man, it's been kind of weird having a week off from the Sixers. It feels like a little like layover. But before we get started today, I want to talk about BetUS. Also, by the way, I didn't mention last time, make sure you're checking out the link in the YouTube bio down here, and also in the podcast if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify. The link to our promo code will be in there as well. You can use our code PickSwap at login to join the fun BetUS, one of the leading sportsbook casinos on the market. And you can do your series predictions, your what was it, the final prediction of the series score, whether it's like Sixers in 5 or whatever it may be. You can go on there and do some pretty cool stuff with BetUS, so make sure you're checking that out, and make sure you click the link down below to get in on the action. So Saturday night, the Sixers enter this next phase of the season. There's been a lot of talk about it. There's been everything from Shaq saying that the Sixers are going to sweep the Raptors to, a portion of the ESPN writers saying that the Raptors are going to win in 7. So there's a lot going on, a lot of different people saying a lot of different things. And I'm not going to say it's going to be an easy series, but this is, I think it's, I don't know. How are you feeling about it? Because I've gone back and forth a lot.
Yeah, I don't feel great about it. Like, this is definitely not a matchup that I'm like thrilled for the Sixers to get, and this is going to be a bloodbath of a series. I can't see it going under 6 games either way. I don't think this is by any means a walkthrough for the Sixers, and I think the Raptors do have a very legitimate chance of finding a way to win it. With that being said, I guess my positive outlook and why I still do believe the Sixers will win is Joel Embiid is by far the best player in the series. I think if you break it down, James Harden is still probably the second best player in the series. As great as the Raptors are top to bottom, they're much deeper than the Sixers. Their strengths and the Sixers' weaknesses do not match up well whatsoever. They're a team that pushes the break, excellent offensive rebounders, and those are pretty much the two areas where the Sixers have been the worst. They tied for 28th in the league in transition defense. Offensive rebound has just plagued them on multiple games all season. Been a consistent talking point. So those are serious things that they have to fix. And I mean, I'm happy they had the week off to practice and get their everything together. It's been a while since the second half of the season schedule for the Sixers has been so brutal that they really just haven't had a chance to kind of break it down X's and O's. So I'm happy that they have a chance to get that. Hopefully they'll be well-oiled going into this playoffs, but definitely not a matchup that I'm majorly confident going into.
Yeah, I can see that. I think this break will help specifically James Harden a lot. And I know we're going to talk about the X factor in this series a little bit later. But, you remember coming off the All-Star break, Harden hadn't played for a while, and he looked entirely different in that first stretch of games than he did throughout the rest, of the season, of the regular season. And, not to say that the playoffs are, any less grueling, definitely more so than the regular season, especially when you're not playing the Pacers and Pistons down the stretch. You're playing actually, a good team that's trying their ass off. Yeah. But you do get a day off or 2 days off in between these games. And with this rest kind of as a prerequisite to getting into the playoffs, I'm hoping that we see a little bit of that extra energy and a little bit of a more explosive James Harden. And obviously we're not expecting him to be, throwing down dunks, which is something that I kind of forget that he's able to do sometimes. Like, I don't know if he can put one down right now.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a single dunk with the 76ers. Dunk the whole second.
Even like he's had a few fast breaks where he slows up and lays it in, like Jimmy Butler style when Jimmy used to do that too. But yeah, man, I'm hoping that this break, as kind of lazy as it felt for us, not really covering anything, I think it's going to benefit the Sixers a lot in terms of kind of getting themselves together. And they have these 2 games at home, and I think game 1 is like very, very important to
Yeah.
the success of the series. Do you feel that way as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always kind of just a statement game in terms of like this Raptors team. I called them the Canadian Heat yesterday. Like
Yeah.
they're very much gritty. Like they're gonna win every loose ball. They're gonna out hustle the Sixers team. They're gonna have their moments where they just look like the team that wants it more. And it's disappointing. Like that we kind of have to know that going in because this has also been an issue with the Sixers team all year. Is that there at times has been that like lack of grit, that lack of just going all out, and that's not at all the case with this Raptors team. If you take it away from the series, I do really like a lot of what this team does. Nick Nurse has done a terrific job building a whole identity as a franchise in terms of like 11 of their 17 rostered players are between 6'7" and 6'9". They're all long and athletic. They don't have a player over 6'9" on roster, which does help with Embiid, but they're so tactical on their doubles. They just have guys flying out of nowhere, help defense just all over the map. They always have a safety net underneath and just some very cool defensive things that they do. Pushing the break. Scotty Barnes is awesome. Scotty Barnes is going to be a problem in this series. They're so much more athletic than the Sixers team, but I don't know. I still skill wise, I guess, have some hope.
Yeah, I'm not obviously there's concerns the way that they play. The Raptors are like, I said it before, last pod, they kind of embody everything the Sixers are not.
Yeah.
But that being said, in that same vein, there's things that the Sixers do that I don't know that the Raptors can stop. I mean, again, we talk about Nick Nurse versus Doc Rivers. Nick Nurse is a much more nuanced, new-aged, modern coach that understands the game of basketball in the year 2022, I think, much more thoroughly than Doc Rivers does. And I saw a clip yesterday of when Harden was on the Rockets playing the Raptors in Nick Nurse's first year, and they doubled him at half court when he was bringing the ball up as the
Yeah.
point guard, and they doubled him at half court just to make him give the ball up. And I can see them doing things like that. Obviously Harden's not the threat this year that he was back in 2018 or whenever that was, but still he's still James Harden, and they're going to throw coverages and different things, doubles, triples, help defense on Joel Embiid to make his life difficult. He's, historically struggled against the Raptors, specifically Nick Nurse led Raptors, and they're going to do everything they can to make other people beat them. The thing that I'm confident in is that Tobias Harris has been playing well, and I'm not saying that he's going to, make or break this series. Joel Embiid's still going to have to play really well for them to win, but a confident, good, solid Tobias and Tyrese Maxey as well. The Sixers don't just have one or two guys; they do have three or four. So that's where I'm feeling like if they can really commit to playing a team game, to allowing Tobias and Maxey to get going early, I think that's going to be really important and integral to the success of this series. Considering that the Raptors are gonna do everything they can to make anyone other than Harden and Embiid beat them. So I think Tobias and Maxey are going to be really important, especially early on in this series.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's so much talk about Harden and Embiid, obviously, because they are the two headliners of this team. But I think a lot of the series is going to come down to the other guys. I think Danny Green is a guy who's going to play an absolutely massive role in the series, just in terms of how much help, how aggressively that they
Yeah.
double both Embiid and Harden. They have when you look back to the games this series, like they're for sure circled on their game plan of we're not letting these two guys beat you, and that translates to open shots for other guys as much as there's like so much noise about the Matisse stuff, I think this is a series that Danny Green has to play way more minutes, even the games at home. Even when Thibault is
Yeah.
able to play, this is a series for Danny Green in my mind, just in terms of like floor spacing. I originally thought that Niang, this might not be a great series for him, but I've kind of flipped on that and just we need the shooting. The defensive struggles will happen for sure, but there just has to be willing shooters surrounding because those are the looks that are going to happen. They are not going to have like pretty much any second of Embiid touching the ball without a second defender coming, and that just translates to open looks. Joel has to be willing to pass the ball. He has to keep his trust
Yeah.
in his teammates. He's done much better of that in recent years, but we've seen the habits where he gets too locked in of needing to do it himself, and he often is capable, but this is a series where the ball can't get stuck. It has to be movement, and if knocking down those open threes is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about it as well with Danny Green, and not that Thibault isn't, obviously he's very switchable. But when you think about the outer guys. Aside from Maxey, the Sixers with this team, with the Raptors, they're able to switch a lot. And I know that they don't do that very often, but I don't know if it's something that they should really like anchor on is the fact that they can't switch. Siakam's gonna really seek out those switches, Fred VanVleet. But I think Maxey's gonna do a good job on Freddie. I think it's tough. I mean, OG and Anunoby, these are guys that last time the Sixers played the Raptors, the Raptors didn't have these guys, these two, and they're arguably their best players, two of the three best players. So I don't know, man. I think, like you said, the spacing, defensively, the switchability. And I think Danny Green does a good job of that. I think Tobias Harris is a solid perimeter defender. Niang is going to struggle in that sense. If he gets switched out, that's going to be tough for him. But he's a hustler. I know that's sometimes not good enough. That sometimes the athletic ability holds him back a bit. But yeah, I think, like you said, Joel Embiid's going to have to commit to being, playing his role. His role is going to be to be himself. But in this series, he's going to have to take what the Raptors give him and being a great player. And I think this is something he's definitely come to understand, especially recently, is like being a great player in this situation. To me, if he's not scoring 30 points per game, but he's giving us, 26 and 5 assists, a little bit over his season average, and making life easier and taking advantage of what the Raptors are, giving up in this sense, will change the series. And there's also going to be times where you do rely on him to be dominant and be himself and take over. But I just think that the Raptors are going to do everything in their power to not let that happen.
Yeah, definitely. And Joel also just he sometimes does that like face up where he just kind of watches regardless of how many defenders are flying out, where he'll like hold the ball above,
Yeah.
which there's like nothing they can do. But that also needs to be kind of cut out for this series. Like the times where he's not being doubled, it needs to be, all right, I'm attacking right now. I'm beating this guy one-on-one. Because once again, like nobody on the roster is over 6'9". That's such a massive height difference for him. There were a couple plays in the sole game that it was Harden and Embiid versus this Raptors team, which there were guys missing on the Raptors, like you just said, but they did a pretty good job of early post-ups, the little pass over the top just to spin and score. That's something that's going to be there if they can make it happen. But I'm sure the Raptors will also be mindful of that, so I don't think it's going to be easy layups every time. But just establishing that early position, I think, is super crucial for him. And once again, like, floor spacing is the name of the game with this team, and having guys to separate it, to spread, and just the more one-on-one matchups that we can get with Joel Embiid, the better for this team.
Yeah, and like you said, attacking them early.
Yeah.
Over under how many games does it take before Nick Nurse makes a comment about the free throws? Not because Nick Nurse actually doesn't like get it. I'm sure he gets it, but to just put it in the ref's ear, to put it in like, out in the universe, to say, they get a lot of free throws. I think it's after game one if they go to the line a lot.
I'm giving Nick Nurse a little bit longer leash. I feel like I mean, regardless, it's big time loser energy to start going public with that. And this, I don't think Nurse is really that guy. I think he's much more an intelligent basketball mind. He understands the concept, understand everything about it. I'm gonna go 3 games. I think after game 3.
Yeah.
Game 3.
I could see that. And I totally agree with you. I think Nick Nurse understands it. I think he fully gets it. I think he's smart enough to know if I say something about it, I think Embiid might put them in hell over games 1 and 2. If guys like Chris Boucher, like, I'm sorry, Chris Boucher is a nice player. Chris Boucher is a toothpick that Embiid walks through. Precious Achua, very good player. I like him a lot. Can't guard Embiid. Like, you go down the line with these guys and whoever else is on that. I mean, there's just guys that aren't big enough to deal with him. And naturally those end up becoming fouls and be going to the free throw line. And I just feel like with the way that this season has gone, the times that guys have complained about free throws, it seems like the games after Embiid gets a tougher whistle, which it is what it is. Embiid talked about it before, saying, when I know I'm not getting calls, I just become more aggressive because then I know they're not going to call anything. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how it goes because a lot of people say, uneducated, they say they're not going to get that call in the playoffs, but Embiid averages more free throws per game attempts in the playoffs. So I'm wondering how that saga will go.
Yeah, I'll say I'm much more worried about the free throw thing with James Harden than I am with Joel Embiid. I think Embiid, like, it's much more like visually unappealing to me to watch the way Harden foul baits than the way Embiid does. Like, Embiid, at least real deal, gets hit for pretty much all his free throws, and he certainly gets his generous whistles. He certainly does. I'm not going to argue with that. But the way he just bodies up, attacks the basket, goes hard to the rim, those are the ones that will continually get you to the line, even in the postseason. The flailing arms, the out of control dribbling, and going towards the basket in the way that Harden does it a lot of times. Those are the ones that I'm worried about will disappear this postseason, and that's such a key part of Harden's game. I will defend Joel Embiid on the foul stuff forever. I get the criticism of James Harden, I guess.
Yeah, I can see it. I think Harden does get fouled at times. I don't know, man. I think it's a good switch now to talk about him. There's been a lot of clips going around recently of him shooting catch and shoots, in practice, which is what we've talked about. I think Harden gets a weird, like, kind of backwards reputation. He works his ass off. He wants to win. He's locked in. I think just as much as anyone else, and I'm really hoping it shows this playoff series again with this rest, and hopefully he's been taking care of himself, which I'm sure he is. But he was asked, what's the pressure like? How do you feel? And he said no pressure. He doesn't feel any pressure. He's confident. Everyone's confident in what they can do. What did you take from that?
Yeah, I think that's like who James Harden is more than anything.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it was meant in any sort of slight way or anything like that. Like, that's just kind of, he's a very even keeled personality. He doesn't let the outside news kind of get to him. He just does his thing. That's who James Harden is. He comes in and he balls. He's a guy that's a hooper. He's not like phased by the moment. I like that a lot about him, and I think that's a good kind of mix for this team. And obviously he wants to win. Obviously Harden competes. When you kind of like pair that with Embiid, who obviously wears his heart on his sleeve, is a guy who lets his emotions show, plays his heart out. I think it's good to have a little bit of a balance in that. So I don't think it's like a bad thing at all. I've seen some kind of negative reactions to that, but I kind of like that mindset going in from him. And that's something Daryl Morey has talked about a lot too. He's like, James Harden specifically is a guy who's like never aware of what's going on in like the national media or on social media or whatever, like the press, which that's cool. Like, I respect that about him, because I think a lot of guys get way too caught up in that. There obviously is pressure for sure. Like, if they do not win this series, it's going to be quite the offseason for the Sixers. There's going to be a lot of change. I think starting with the head coach, and I think there's a lot more beyond that too. So there is certainly pressure. It's not a no-stakes situation whatsoever, but I do like Harden's mindset.
Yeah, I do too. And I think it's the right one. When you talk about it, I know that there is, and I know that there's a lot to talk about right now with this 76ers team. And I think there's a lot of implications post this year with the way that things are going to shake out. But in the grand scheme of things, what are you going to do other than put the work in and play the games? Like, James Harden's not going to sit down and say like, oh, my legacy is on the line here, or Doc's legacy is on the, like, those things might be true. But to them, I think a lot of people are falling on these two sides of things, especially when you go and you talk about the MVP conversation, which we're not going to talk about today. But when you think about that, like, the players understand. The players see this. KD called it out. Kuzma called it out. John Morant. There's somebody else. Halliburton. Yeah, Halliburton. Like, these guys are saying, like, it's Embiid. Embiid's the award. And, these guys can argue about whatever else. And Harden too. Like, there's guys that I've seen say, James Harden was my favorite player growing up. Like, I loved him. So I think a lot of people recognize what it is. James Harden is, going to go down as one of the best ever. And he knows that. But, right now he's focused on winning. I think Embiid is focused on winning. And I know I just said that I liked his, his even keel, not too up, not too down. But I need to see energy. I think this series specifically, and I think it would be the perfect stepping stone. And this is maybe why I haven't been so like struggling with the idea of the Sixers beating the Raptors. I'm still confident that they will. But with this series, I think an underlying thing is like the Sixers are going to need to turn it up, right? To beat this team. They're going to need to turn up. And I think that is the best possible way to start the playoffs for them. To have to show energy, to have to, put your heart on the floor, to have to play hard and hustle and fly all over the place. Like, last year they sleptwalked through the Wizards series. Like, let's be serious. That team sucked. They had no chance of beating the Sixers. They had no business beating the Sixers, even in a game, let alone a series. and everybody and their mother knew that, right? And then
Yeah.
they got to the Hawks, and the Hawks punched them in the mouth. So I think this year, having to deal with a team like the Raptors early on is the best way for them to start and make a run in the playoffs. Because I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think the Sixers fell victim to like looking too far ahead all last
Yeah,
postseason. They had their route scheduled, and even looking this year, like they don't have to play the Bucks, the Nets, or uh, who else am I thinking?
Celtics,
They're or the
Celtics.
Celtics to make it to the conference finals, which is a pretty nice route that you have. Uh, I agree that they've done way too much on like thinking ahead on that. You
Yeah,
focus up, you play one series at a time, you win a game. This Raptors team is going to be a challenge. I do think this is like it's going to be a bloodbath. Like I can't think of another way to
yeah.
put it than just like they're going to have to earn this one, which it is cool for this team. I'm ready for it. I'm interested to just see how they come out. I hope they come out to a hot start.
I think so too. I don't know, man. I think being at home, again though, they haven't been that good at home,
Yeah.
which is disappointing. But I don't know. I'm excited. I just am genuinely excited to see this team fully in action. Like it seems like this entire like second half of the year, ever since that first stretch with Harden, to me, it's just felt like we're getting to the playoffs and then we're going to turn it on,
Yeah.
which isn't the best way to do things. You see, like the Celtics had a much different approach, where it was like they sucked the first half of the year, and then they turned it on in the second half, and they've been incredible since. Um, to go off topic a little bit, though, I do want to ask you about that series, the Celtics and Nets, because personally, I think that the Celtics are maybe the only team defensively that is equipped to handle Brooklyn.
Yeah, the injury to Robert Williams hurts.
Yeah,
Schematically, the stuff they do is very high level, very impressive. The switchability, it's very frustrating to me to see Al Horford have resurrected his career and become an effective player again. But he's
uh,
extremely helpful defensively in what he does, the way he rotates, the way he calls out sets. It's going to be a fascinating series. I think that's one that's also going to go pretty deep, also going to be pretty up in the air. Uh, I Terrific turnaround from Boston. It's very impressive
yeah,
how they've gone from think about early in the season, the talks of how Tatum and Brown need to be broken up to now all the way to the second seed in the East is a very insane turnaround. So I think that's going to be a crazy series. The Nets strategy is pretty much like we have Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant and you don't. And so far that's worked for them. It definitely worked in the play-in. They've been another team that has just I just want to punch my ticket to get into the playoffs and then we'll flip it on from there. And that's what they look to plan on do. They're a scary team. They're still a scary team. Both teams are scary. So I think that's going to be a difficult series. I do agree that the Celtics are probably, if not the one of the best matchups to face the Nets. So it's going to be that's going to be a fun one to watch for sure.
yeah, and there's storylines, man. Kyrie in Boston,
Yeah,
everything that's going on. But I just think, defensively, Marcus Smart is one of the few guards, like the few true guards that can play 40 minutes and follow Kyrie's shadow everywhere. And then Jalen Brown's an elite perimeter defender, and Jason Tatum, size wise, athletically, can keep up with KD. I mean, really, when things happen, like when you look at the other night, Kyrie's 9 of 9, 10 of 10 from the floor. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do, right? There's KD and
yeah,
Kyrie are gods amongst men. There's nights that you're just not going to stop them, but I think over the course of a series, Boston has a chance. I don't know. I'm excited for it. I'm happy that they're going to beat the shit out of each other
mhm.
before they move on. Milwaukee has the easiest matchup, right? You think probably
Yeah.
with Chicago.
Yeah, I wanted the Bulls for the Sixers,
Yeah,
and
me
by
too.
the way, I want nothing. I wanted nothing more. I want nothing more than the Nets to lose that Celtics series. So I
Yeah.
will absolutely be rooting Boston as much as it pains me. And Milwaukee is still a legit team this year. Like Giannis
Yes.
continues to get better, which is insane
Scary.
considering how good he already is. And but just the growth in his touch, he it just impresses me that every year he continues to add layers to his game, considering how high his ceiling has already gotten. That Boston or that Milwaukee team is no joke with Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, obviously the defending champs, and they have a real strong chance this year. I do think that they should be by far the favorite to come out of the East.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I mean, Milwaukee is fantastic. I talked about it earlier with one of my classmates, and I was like, yeah, man, like Drew Holiday to me is like the perfect basketball player. Like he does everything so well, like just so smooth, never out of control. I miss him. I really do. Here he's fantastic, and defensively another guy that's just fantastic. But
And he's
to
in a
kind of
perfect role there too.
perfect role, man. He doesn't
Yeah.
have to do too much. There's nights where he can fill it up and be, a game changer, a series changer, which is fantastic for him. But yeah, perfect role for him.
Mhm.
To kind of bring it back to Philly here, your biggest X factor for this series.
Yeah, I think it's James Harden. I think it's pretty clear. It's James Harden. It's interesting when looking back at these matchups with the Raptors. Just looking at it on paper, like my thoughts were that the athleticism of these wings would swallow Harden up. We've seen the lack of explosiveness. We've seen the inability to elevate and blow past people. But that really hasn't been exactly what has happened in games. He's gotten his shots and he's had his looks and just hasn't hit. And that's really what we're waiting on with James Harden. If he has that flip the switch for playoff mode and can start knocking down shots, can get his look, has some sort of mid-range game, has some sort of floating game, this Sixers team will win the series. I think it's that simple that there's that many looks that are designed for Harden to take to create his own shot. And if he can be effective on that, that's all the Sixers need. And it hasn't really happened since the first couple of games that he's been in Philly that he's been able to connect reliably on those. So I'm not saying it's a for sure bet that that will be the case, but I do think that's the X factor for the Sixers. And I think that they not live or die by his play, but that it certainly plays a major role.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. We've seen an up and down James Harden through this. James Harden at his not his best so far in the Sixers stint is still pretty good, but him playing at, a high level, giving you 20 and 10, you just can't beat that. With the defense, like with the Raptors defense, the way that they fly around, having James Harden kind of like what we talked about, even keel. You can see he's constantly just like processing, like his eyes are just kind of always gearing up to make the
Yeah.
next play. And with the Raptors and the way that they move and fly around in their youth, I could see James Harden really taking advantage of that. And obviously, as a facilitator, it's more important. But to see those scoring numbers kind of shoot up would be nice as well. I think I'm gonna get my X factor is gonna be Tyrese Maxey,
Yeah.
just because I think that if he can continue, which I'm expecting this from him, and I know it's a lot to expect from him, but to be the third guy here, which I think he deserves to be, continuing the shooting, spacing the floor, like what we talked about with guys like Danny Green. Like if Maxey can continue to catch and shoot and pull up from distance, that'll break the game open. And then when you talk about guys that, he's going to have to defensively, he's going to have to chase Fred VanVleet around and he's going to have to stick to him. Otherwise, when you get mixed around and, with Toronto's size and length, the last thing you want is to have him with, Siakam or Achua or whoever it might be, OG Anunoby. Those guys are just going to be too much offensively for Maxey to handle. So defensively, he needs to stick with Fred VanVleet. So I think this is going to be a really good test for him on both ends to see if he can, which again, I think we're confident in the fact that like he's going to show up to these moments because every time that he's had the opportunity to show up to a big moment, he's done it. And even in a playoff series last year, he won them a game. So I don't know. I think Maxey just, there's the variability of the Sixers offense. And he could, if he's consistent through this series, I think he kind of shores that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said about how keyed in on Embiid and Harden, the Raptors defenses, that opens up looks for Maxey. And like as athletic and quick twitch as many of these Raptors like wings and defenders are, Maxey's still capable of blowing by these guys. And he has that burst that the Sixers will need to utilize. And looking at like the matchup with Van Fleet, which I think when Matisse is playing, he will take the bulk of those matchups defensively. But I think Maxey will definitely have to have his moments. And Van Fleet is a pesky defender himself too. Like I don't like not I don't feel unconfident about it, but it's not going to be a matchup that Maxey I think blows him out of the water. Like he will have his moments where there will be a little bit of a growing up process in this series, I think, for Maxey, and which is not a bad thing. And the fact that it like hasn't happened this far is crazy. But a big series out of Maxey would make a major deal, and he's been every bit ready for the spotlight. I would love to see him step up, and it wouldn't shock me if he ends up like outscoring James Harden in this series.
Yeah, I could see it. Especially if Harden is fixed on being a facilitator, which we've seen him do, throughout his time with the Sixers. I think an underrated part of this and something I kind of like I remember and then forget about pretty quickly is the fact that like this is the first time the Sixers have seen the Raptors in the playoffs since that fateful day in Toronto. But to me, I think that sits in Joel Embiid's brain. Like he's a petty
For sure.
guy. He's a competitor. And that's kind of also another reason, like when I talk about the energy and what needs to happen with this team for them to beat the Raptors, like being led by a guy like Joel Embiid, who obviously is one of the best, if not the best player in the world right now. On top of the fact that like the most disappointing and heartbreaking loss in his career came in Toronto, I think that there's a good chance that he's like hyper locked in, like hyper focused. So like maybe, and we can talk about our serious prediction in a second, but like, what do you think? Him, are you expecting 30 plus a night?
I think that's kind of the norm now. So I
Yeah,
guess in a way,
that's
yeah,
true. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess I kind of am. I mean, that's just kind of who Joel Embiid is at this point.
Yeah.
Is he fills it up that much? I agree. I think this is in his mind too. It's obviously a completely different Raptors team than that 2019 team. Obviously, no Kawhi,
Right.
no Marcus All wearing him down. But
No Danny
there
Green.
are so what's that?
No Danny Green.
No Danny Green. Yeah, it's sitting on the other sideline for this one. But there's a lot of the same issues that like are still there. The backup center, which obviously we've talked a ton about, like that's still very much a question mark. And I'm still not confident that DeAndre Jordan is going to be the first big man off the bench, which I will be screaming at the television if that's what happens. But like winning the non-Embiid minutes is absolutely like as has always been the case, crucial for the Sixers team and finding a way to survive that. I hope they unleash B-Ball Paul because he's going to be totally necessary in this series to survive those, to bring the productivity to match the Raptors' athleticism. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure Embiid has had this one circled. Just he's got a lot of when we talk about him being like I guess like put it on the whiteboard, put it on the board, like noted things. There's a lot that he is stacking up in terms of the MVP stuff, the Raptors in the past, that all the noise that's going around him. I do think he will lock in and be ready to go.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see him this year in the playoffs. He's just a different beast. And I think this is setting up for him to have like the Raptors are a difficult matchup because of the coaching, but I think it's just setting up for him to be dominant. And I think again, if you're looking at potential, and I don't want to look ahead, but if you're talking Raptors and then potentially the Heat, those are two teams that he's historically struggled against. And it could be time for him to rewrite history and change that trajectory. To go, we've talked about the backup center so often, but I almost mentioned it earlier too. Like, I genuinely think there could be times where like Embiid and Paul Reed share the floor. Like
Yeah.
when you think about the Raptors and what they do size and lengthwise and offensive rebounding, like I think when the Sixers need to defensively just kind of lock in, I really do think that there's a chance that like they could go big and kind of, Paul Reed defensively switching, flying around on the boards. And again, we talked about the fouls. The fouls are what they are. It is what it is. But I think there's a chance for me when I think about it. And again, I know we all don't know as much as Doc knows about the game. He's, we know that by now. But like, do you think that, would you consider that if you're in the position to make those decisions? Obviously, I don't think that Doc Rivers is thinking about that at all.
Yeah, once again, it's two different answers for me. Is A, like I absolutely would consider that personally. I think it's a great idea. I think it would be very useful. And B, I think there's zero chance Doc Rivers actually does it. I think
Yeah.
I think that and this was something that they tried this season too. Like Paul Reed started a couple games alongside Embiid, and early on in the season, I think he had 4 starts this year. I'm pretty sure, and it was something like I loved, and that was I was loving it at the time because one of my like things I've hammered home all year is like Paul Reed is not getting better doing what he's doing in the G League. He already knows how to be a superstar in the G League. What he's not good at or what he needs to improve on is being a complementary player amongst NBA star and legitimate NBA players. Like he's not going to be a guy getting post up calls for him on an every play basis like he does in the Blue Coats. That's never going to be his game in the NBA because what he is a grinder, a guy that helps, a useful player. He would be incredibly useful in that role against this Raptors team for all the reasons we just talked about, with the athleticism, with the switchability, the length, the things he brings to the table. I still think Doc is so. I think he just hates Paul Reed so much. I think that he has all the noise so correlated directly to Paul, which is super shitty. But I think that he will look for every excuse not to give him minutes, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think so too. But I guess we'll see, won't we? It's going to be DeAndre Jordan stumbling around for 8 minutes a night. and it's gonna be miserable. It's gonna be miserable. I think this is a series they would have done the Drummond and Embiid minutes. It's funny that Doc was that he did that, but he wouldn't. Anyway, I'm gonna go on a tangent. I don't want to go on a tangent. Anyway, I think we can go here right into the series prediction because
Mhm.
on Tuesday you said I don't think it goes less than 6.
Yeah.
So do you
I'm
still
gonna.
feel that way?
Yeah, I don't think it goes less than 6. I think my final prediction is Sixers in 7. I still think the NBA is such a star-driven league, the playoffs specifically. I just think Embiid will this team to pass the first round at a minimum. Uh, the Raptors are going to put up a fight. This is one that definitely scares me. I wouldn't be shocked if they don't find a way to get out of this round, and it'd be super disappointing based on this entire season. But I think Sixers in 7 is my official prediction.
All right. I think I'm gonna go. So I know that there's a lot of. I would be more worried. I'm more worried about them in a game 7 than I am about the series, if that makes sense. Like I would be less confident in a game 7 game than I am that the Sixers will win in less than 7, if that makes sense at all. Like
Okay.
I think if it came down to a game 7, I think the Sixers lose. Like genuinely, I do. But I think they win in 5.
Wow.
I'm gonna say they win in 5. Like I don't think that the Raptors can beat this team. I know maybe that's naive. Maybe I've lost track of everything that's happened. I've kind of thrown out the notes at this point. And I've always been kind of blindly confident in this team. And maybe that's my fault, but I'm hopeful again. I'm ready to get hurt again. It's going to be miserable. I will be miserable if this season ends this
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
I will be miserable. I will be a bitter human being for the next 5 months if the Sixers don't make it out of round 1 against the Toronto Raptors. And that's why I think I'm looking at this. I'm like, they can't lose. They can't lose. I didn't think they were going to lose to the Hawks, but at least that was round 2. Like they have to make it through round 1 here. They're better than the Raptors. They need to know that. They need to play like that, but they also need to bring it. Energy wise, physically, they have to dominate, and Embiid has to impose himself, from the rup. So I'm hoping, I'm hopeful, and I'm confident that this team will beat the Raptors in 5 games.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys in the Sixers franchise with things to prove. I love your
Yeah.
optimism, James, but looking ahead, I mean, obviously Embiid has not a track record of struggling in the playoffs, but he certainly has his moments where he's not played up to his standard.
Yeah.
James Harden is another guy who has a reputation as wilting in the postseason. I think it's cool that they kind of get to overcome their struggles together and kind of rewrite their story together. Doc Rivers, I know he is Greg Popovich in his mind, but he has absolutely had his postseason struggles coming off an absolute collapse last year. So that has to be weighed into everything. And I think there's been enough whispers lately that the Doc Rivers story in Philadelphia may be over no matter what. But I think a first round exit absolutely locks that up. And for James Harden, there's a major financial decision kind of on the line for what the Sixers will do. If he struggles in this playoffs, if he really just doesn't have any pop, doesn't have the burst, if the shots aren't falling, I think there is a real chance the Sixers reconsider dishing him out that massive mega contract. So there's a lot on the line, but beyond just this first round series. And obviously the goal for this current Sixers team is still to win a championship. So that starts with getting by the Raptors. And once again, you continue to punch your ticket from there. So I don't know. I appreciate the optimism. I'm happy that you're as confident as you are. Uh, I'm scared for the series. I really am.
I don't know, man. Like you said, there's a lot going into this, and I think they could get wrapped up in the everything that's happening, everything outside. But like you said, James Harden normally keeps it close to home, and I'm hoping that his leadership combined with Embiid and his leadership can hopefully keep this on track. But like you said, if they get bounced right here, it's a stamped. Doc Rivers is gone. You can go retire in LA. I don't care. I think if they don't make it. If they make it to the finals, he's probably coming back. I think if it's anything but a final, like I think if it's literally anything but a championship, I think he should be gone. Genuinely, I do. But it'll be interesting to see if that's the case. I hope that we don't have to deal with that until a couple weeks past here. But do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. I guess trust the process. I'm a little down right now. I don't know why I'm so unconfident right now.
Get up,
I know I
get
gotta get
up.
excited. Sixers playoffs about to start. This is what we've been waiting for. So a lot to prove. Let's get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we gotta bring the energy as well. I think as a city, we gotta bring the energy. Like, there's too many people that aren't like pumped for this, and I feel
Yeah,
like I'm ready to go, and I think they are too. I feel like the season kind of was a lull for the last few weeks. It was kind of just like
survive.
sleepwalking through everything. Yeah,
Mhm.
and Embiid was giving you 40 and 10, so like that's how it is for him. But I think they got to get back to that energy basketball they were playing when Harden first got here, and I'm hopeful and confident that's what's gonna happen. But that being said, we'll wrap it up here. We're not going to talk to you guys until after game one. Actually, probably until after game two because they play on Monday night. So
Yeah.
Saturday and Monday, the Sixers play at home, both Saturday and Monday. So we'll catch you guys after you know the first two games of the postseason. Hopefully, I'm still happy. Hopefully, Sean's in a little bit better spirits come Tuesday afternoon when we catch you guys again. But until then, keep up with everything because I'm sure we'll have a lot to say. You can follow Sean on his Twitter at Sean_Bernard1. Follow me at JSbrain17. Follow the pod at PickSwapPod. Check out the YouTube and anywhere you get your podcast. Make sure, again, check the link in the bio here to get your link to BetUS and bet with us using our code PickSwap at login to get your first bet risk-free up to $500. Stay tuned. Go Sixers, and we'll catch you guys after game two on Tuesday afternoon.